So, as an Instacart shopper and delivery driver, what would you say is your most important consideration? The thing you have to be the most thoughtful and careful about? If you said choosing the right items for your order, that would be a good answer, but it's not the number one answer. If you said choosing, good produce and high quality items, that would be a good answer, but that's not the right answer either. Um, and if you said, taking your delivery picture uh, and documenting your delivery carefully so that if you get accused of fraud, you have some documentation, that would be a good answer, but that's not the answer. The number one job, number one consideration, most important thing as a delivery driver is driving safety. Driving safety. Why is that? Well, because no matter how much money you make at Instacart, no matter how quick you get shopping items, if you're number one in your market, you're the fastest shopper on the board, and you deliver faster than anybody else, all it takes is one bad traffic accident and it will wipe out all the money you have ever made at Instacart. Um, at a minimum, it might do that. It could kill or seriously injure one or more people. It could kill or seriously injure you. So I cannot stress enough that the number one thing that you have to be careful about when you're an Instacart driver is your driving. And when you're delivering for Instacart or for any other service, DoorDash, Postmates, there are so many distractions. There are so many um, pressures and even fears. And there are so many things that can go wrong while you're driving. And there are um, a whole lot of bad practices that, we have to every day as Instacart drivers, we have to really try hard to break ourselves of these really bad habits when we're driving. And no matter how many times I think about this and tell myself this stuff, it's a daily battle because every day is different. And every day, some days you're going to be tired or you're going to be thinking clearly. Whatever the reason is, or you're going to be distracted, and that's the day when you'll make that really fatal mistake driving. So, this video has some suggestions and tips and tricks that I have found, that are good practice if you're driving for a delivery service. So, the number one thing to talk about is how do we avoid, you know, hitting a pedestrian, and especially how do we avoid hitting a child, right? Because this is the worst nightmare that you can possibly imagine. And, it can happen if you're driving for Instacart or for a delivery service. So how do you avoid it? Okay, well there are some basic rules, and techniques for avoiding it. Um, I'll put my glasses on to look more professorly, look more like a professor or something. Actually, I think they make me look kind of silly and they reflect light, so I'll leave them off. So, with COVID, with the pandemic, more children are at home than ever before. Um, Children are everywhere. They are playing everywhere, and they are often playing in places where they really shouldn't be playing. And so, when you drive into a subdivision, now I'm talking about a subdivision that has just houses, all right? You want to go at the most, you want to be going at the posted speed limit in the subdivision, not faster. And really, you want to be going even slower. And there are criteria for deciding how fast you should go in a subdivision. Should you go slower even than the posted speed limit? Well, if both sides or one side of the street have all kinds of parallel parked cars along the curb, you should go as slow as possible. I mean, like 5 miles an hour would not be a bad idea. 1 mile an hour would not be a bad idea. And why is that? Well, it's because children can jump out from behind those parked cars. You got kids all over the place. They're riding their big wheels, they're riding their scooters, they're riding their electric cars that they sit in on top of. They're riding little bikes and, they're chasing after balls and they can suddenly just out of nowhere they can come out from behind a parked car and it doesn't take a little child weighs 50 pounds and a car weighs 2,000 plus pounds. So even if you're just going 1 mile per hour, like if you're just moving forward a few inches every few seconds, that's enough to do catastrophic damage to a child if you hit them. So when you're going through a subdivision, eyes straight ahead every single second. Don't even glance at the Google Maps on your telephone for even one split second. If you're moving forward at all, you gotta have your eyes straight ahead. Gotta be watching those parked cars. Gotta be going 1 mile per hour if it's full of cars. Now, if you're going down a subdivision road and all the cars are parked in driveways and there's no cars parallel parked along the road, and you can see clearly on both sides of the road up onto the lawns, well, then you could probably go 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, right? You can come through the subdivision at the posted speed limit. But believe me, no one is ever going to fault you for going through the subdivision at less than the speed limit. Now we get to even bigger hazardous area. Apartment complexes and condo complexes that have big parking areas. A lot of times, condo complexes and apartment complexes have a lot of children living there, and they tend to play in the parking lots. They're riding around on their scooters, bikes, whatever, in between the parked cars, especially if there's, central parking where like there's multi rows of parking that are out in the middle of the lot. And so that comes to some other defensive driving rules, which is when you go through through a apartment complex or condominium complex, multifamily housing complex, again, you got to drive super, super, super slow. 1 mile an hour, fine. And some other rules. Don't cut across empty parking spaces. Okay, kids, especially little children, they don't really understand about where they're supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be. And they will suddenly appear out, from some parked cars where there's a few parked cars, but there's some empty spaces. And you will find them in those empty spaces. And sometimes they will come riding out on their little bike. That little bike with that little kid and head, might only be like 2 or 3 feet off the ground, so you're not going to see them until they've come out into the traffic lane and then, you could hit them. So, subdivision rules are kind of as follows. I hope I don't forget any of them. One is always drive in the actual traffic lanes, never cut across some empty parking spaces to save time. Second, never, ever, ever back up your vehicle in a subdivision or apartment complex or condominium complex because, again, backing up is super, super dangerous where children could be present. So don't park in a parking space in the condo or apartment complex parking lot. Just parallel park along a curb so you can drive straight forward when you go to leave after you've done your delivery. You don't want to ever have to back up in a area where there might be children. And that brings another point, which is you really should have a backup camera on your car if you're going to deliver for Instacart or any other delivery service. If you don't have a backup camera, you can buy them on Amazon as add-ons, and you can take it to a local shop and they will rig it up. These backup cameras typically fit on your license plate, rear license plate, and then they have a wireless monitor that sits on your dashboard, and it allows you to retrofit your older vehicle with a backup camera, and it's wired into your your reverse gear, so when you go into reverse, it automatically comes on. So backup camera is really good, but the main thing is when you're in a subdivision when you're anywhere where children could possibly be, which is almost anywhere, but especially in subdivisions, apartment complexes, and condo complexes, you always want to park your vehicle so that when you leave, you won't have to back up. Because backing up is super dangerous. And that brings up another rule, another safety rule, which is don't ever pull up into someone's driveway when you're making a delivery. Just parallel park at the curb and walk the extra distance. There are a few exceptions to that rule, which I will mention in a minute, but how come it is that we don't want to pull into a driveway and then have to back up after we're done with our delivery? Well, the reason is that if you pull into like a typical short driveway, like 100, 200 feet or less, when you back up, not only could you hit and kill a child that got in behind your vehicle, while you were delivering, or kind of ran across while you were backing up. But backing out of a driveway also has other problems. Like if you're not paying attention, you could hit the person's mailbox and damage their mailbox, and then they're going to call Instacart and they're going to tell Instacart they want their mailbox repaired at Instacart's expense. And even something like this, you can back up and if your tire goes off the driveway and goes into the grass, if the grass is wet or the ground is wet, it's going to leave a big track mark. And some of these people are really passionate about their lawns, and they will run out there after you leave and they will take a picture of your tire marks all over their lawn and grass, and they will call Instacart and they will say, "Oh, hey, your driver did $200 worth of damage to my grass," so. Or you could hit some object in their driveway, or you could get broadsided coming back out of the driveway by cross traffic, coming down the road, because most cars, except for very newer model cars, do not have the cross traffic alert. So really want to avoid going up into a driveway. The exceptions are circular driveways where the driveway has an entrance and an exit. So like you make a big U on a more grandiose house that has a big circular driveway. That's good. You can use those driveways for sure. You just have to be careful you stay on the pavement, and again, don't damage the grass. But come up the driveway, pull up in front of the front door, deliver, and then keep driving forward and go out. That's fine. If it's a super, super big estate and it's a super long driveway, like, a quarter of a mile, you really have no choice. You've got to go down the driveway. But those kind of houses usually have a big turnaround at the house. They have the house is that big, they're going to have parking for, several cars on the estate, and usually a place where you can turn around. So But the basic rule is, don't drive up into the driveways unless you got a really clear way to turn around or to keep going straight, because backing up out of a driveway is really dangerous. So then, now, what about when we're on the road? Like we're navigating, we're just in traffic. We're on the freeway, we're on surface roads, we're on smaller country roads. How about some rules there about, how to be safe? Um, so Google Maps, when I first started driving for delivery service, Instacart, I was always, kind of glancing at the Google, like the map. And then I realized, at some point, it's really dangerous to glance away from traffic and look at the map, because a lot can happen in like 2 split seconds while you're glancing at the cell phone. And you actually don't need to. So I have some rules now, for when driving in traffic. One is no radio, no tunes, nothing, okay? I'm just in a quiet car and I'm waiting for the Google mapping lady to tell me the next turn, right? Because I got to be paying close attention to what she says. She's going to say left or right, or she's going to say be in the second lane from the right, or she's going to say be in the middle lane, or, make a left and then make a quick right. You got to be waiting. You got to have your mind clear. Don't be thinking about distracting thoughts. You got to just put all that stuff out of your mind, and you got to just focus on driving and on listening. And the listening part is, uh, you don't even need to have your screen on while you're getting directions. You can just black out your screen, turn off the display, and she will tell you each turn. Google Maps has gotten really good, so she tells you all the turns, before you, so that you have adequate reaction time to get ready for which lane you got to be in or whatever. And it also saves a ton of power on your phone, so that you have it when you're in the grocery store, because people are like, you know, it's 2 p.m. and my battery on my phone, is already down to like 40%. If you, map your destination from your location and then glance at it to see basically where you're going to be going, and then start the turn by turn, and then black out the screen, you can go the whole thing without having to ever look at your Google Maps. You're just listening for her verbal instructions on what to do next. Um, so that brings up another thing, which is suppose your mind does wander for a second, and you miss something she said. Like you hear her say, turn, but you didn't quite hear whether she said left or right, or you got a lane change coming up that she needs you to make, and you can't remember which lane she told you to go into, or sometimes, if you're in an area where cell coverage is kind of spotty or not totally consistent, sometimes she will, like lose connectivity, and she won't tell you a turn until you're almost passing it. Like, let's say it's a 4-lane road and you're in the far left lane, and suddenly she wants you to make a right. So what should you do? Should you, like quickly look into your rearview mirror, on the passenger side and try to cut across 4 lanes at the last second and make that right turn? No, really not. Even if you have 4 lanes clear, you might miss something. You might miss a motorcyclist or something, and, you could cause a really bad accident if you make an unpredictable, sudden cut across 4 lanes. So, in those kind of situations, the best thing, and also don't ever slam the brakes on, or slow down your speed dramatically to make a last minute course adjustment, because that's how you get rear-ended. The people behind you, they're not expecting you to slow down dramatically. And so when you get into these situations where you're not in position and she wants you to make a turn or something, and there's no way you can really do it safely, you just keep going. Just stay on your current route. Don't slow down. Just go with the flow because she will reroute you, right? We all know that. You'll hear the little tone and she'll reroute and then she'll tell you how to, get there. I mean, even if you have to drive like a mile out of your way, if it's on some road that just has a few exits, but normally it's just a 2 or 3 minute, reroute. So that's the other thing. Um, Now, another one to be aware of, another gotcha is when you're making, say, a right turn, but it's not a right angle turn, it's one of those curved, flowing yield signs where you're going to make a right turn and there's a curved thing that cuts the corner and there's a yield sign there. More accidents occur at those curved yield signs than you could possibly imagine. Um, and there's several ways that accidents happen there, the most typical ones. So the most typical one that happens is you get rear-ended, or you rear-end someone in one of those curved right turn yield type turns. And here's why it happens. So you got a driver in front of you who's maybe a little timid, and they start to go, like they look like they're going to go. They've stopped at the yield. Now the traffic has gotten a little lighter, and they're going to make the turn. So they start to make the turn. So what is your instinct? Your instinct now is you're going to go too. And what do? You look over your left shoulder to see if there's any traffic coming. And when you look back, clunk, bang, the person in front of you suddenly stopped and you hit them, you rear-ended them. Or it can be the reverse. Like you started to go, then you saw something that made you realize you should stop, and the person behind you was looking over the left shoulder, starting to roll forward, and they hit you. So the rule on those right turns when it's a yield sign and a curved turn is rule one is never be moving forward if you're not looking forward, because a lot of accidents happen on those yield signs. And the second rule is, don't look over your left shoulder if you're moving forward. And the third rule is, if you're the lead car, and you're making the curved turn at the yield sign, once you start to go, don't put your foot on the brake, keep going. So before you start to go, be absolutely 1000% sure that you have clear distance to make the whole turn and keep going, and do not have a sudden hesitation where you suddenly cancel and decide to hit the brake, because that's when you're going to get rear-ended. Okay. There are so many other rules. I every day I'm out there and I'm like, I should write these down. Um, when you're in a grocery store parking lot, okay, always try to find a parking space where you won't have to back out. So try to, pull forward into a space where the nose of your car is pointing out, so that when you come out, you can just go straight out. You won't have to, this is again going back to avoid situations where you have to back up. Another biggie, is lane changes. Of course, you got to be really careful with lane changes, but I think everybody knows that one, right? So, I mean, the main ones, to know are just these ones that, are more like what Instacart drivers deal with, which is being in these subdivisions and apartment complexes and things like that. And I know I'm forgetting some other ones. Oh, another one is, don't run yellow lights, okay? Like you're tempted to run yellow lights, don't do it. Okay, just if you're coming towards a light, don't speed up to try to make the green light. Just kind of even fall back a little bit, ease off the gas and, approach the green light, thinking, well, if it turns yellow, I'm going to stop. So, if you're kind of slowing a little bit as you approach the intersection, instead of starting to speed up, it's going to be easier to come to a stop. It's really tempting to do the to run through the yellow light, but don't do it, because if you're a professional driver it just leads to situations that can be catastrophic. Some people jump the gun, when they get a green light, they start to come through, and if you're coming through on yellow, you're going to get broadsided. So that's important. Now, here's another one I just thought of. Glad I thought of this one because I had this happen a few weeks ago. So if it's a big, like 4 or 5 lane road, with traffic, 2 lanes going one way and 2 lanes going the other way, and no divider, oftentimes there will be a center lane that's marked with yellow solid on the outside of it and dotted yellow on the inside. And that's those turn lanes, right? Where it's a really busy, busy, big road, 4 lanes plus a fifth lane that's in the middle. And that fifth lane is so that you can pull out of the traffic lanes and sit in the middle of the road and then make your right turn or your left turn or whatever. So here's the scenario that I'm talking about. You're going to make a left turn into like some small, street off of a major street, and you're looking kind of ahead at the little green street sign, that's at the corner. You want to make sure that you're turning on the street that the Google Maps wants you to turn, and you're coming into that yellow center turn lane. So, but you're not really looking ahead. You're kind of looking too far ahead. You're looking towards the street that you're going to turn into. You're trying to see that street sign behind that little tree that's at the corner, that's got leaves on it, and you can't quite see if it's the name of the street that she wants you to turn on. Here's what happened. I was doing that. I was looking kind of forward, trying to see the street sign, and I wasn't really looking at